How's it going, you guys? So in this video I want to talk a little bit about my own view on nutrition as a whole, what I believe is healthy as far as nutrition and herbs and supplementation is concerned. This, I suppose, you can think of as my blueprint for nutrition and health, or my manifesto, I suppose, of sorts, because I've made a lot of videos about the carnivore diet, about low-carb, ketogenic diets, and I think a lot of people might have wrong assumptions about what I believe is healthy and what type of nutrition, what style of nutrition, what diet I advise or I recommend. Okay, so at a baseline, I wouldn't say that I recommend one diet in general. I see nutrition as an extremely intricate and nuanced subject in which there's a lot of wiggle room within all the little areas, carbohydrate intake, fat intake, protein intake, what sources you get all those things from, the different needs for different types of people living different lifestyles. Micronutrient needs are something that's extremely nuanced and there's really no clear-cut guidelines. And so I see nutrition from a more holistic perspective. I look at all different areas of it. But with that being said, there are some particular paradigms of nutrition that I think are extremely viable for certain people. But I don't advocate those things exclusively. So in general, obviously the main principle to my own nutrition philosophy is minimize damage, maximize benefit. Okay, that's always been my underlying premise, and it's one that I was very vocal about in 2017, 2018, before I got on the low-carb train. So what does that mean? That means eat the foods that create the least amount of side effects, negative effects, and so-called perceived negative markers on your blood tests, and in particular heart rate variability, and other factors involved in strain and stress in general. So there's a lot of studies that can show mechanistic data for one food being inflammatory, and then there's evidence at the same time that says it's not inflammatory. So navigating the scientific literature surrounding inflammatory foods is a very sketchy subject, and so I don't really think it's wise to use scientific evidence as a guidance tool for what foods are harmful or good or bad. I think using scientific evidence as a tool for showing the basic human needs, such as protein intake, for example, and the necessity of carbohydrates and fats, is probably a good idea. But beyond that, dairy is inflammatory, leads to cancer, says the rat research where they fed them aflatoxin at such a high amount. Please, it does not translate into real-world outcomes using isolated casein protein in inhumane amounts. So real-world experimentation, trial and error, and then testing, using subjective testing and objective testing to figure out what foods are harmful or not harmful for you, is the big factor here that can help you determine which nutrition paradigm or which foods or all the details. So at a baseline, I believe that there is 100% a minimum protein intake that human beings need. And I believe that is probably on the bare minimum, for sedentary individuals, would be 0.5 grams per pound of lean mass. So that lies somewhere around 1 gram per kilogram of lean mass, okay? Or optimal body weight, we could put it that way if you don't know your lean mass. But everyone should get a 3D body fat scan. Those are really readily available now. or a DEXA scan or some type of scan that can measure lean mass to fat mass ratio. Because that falls under objective testing. Like, if you really want to know what's healthy for you or not, you need all the objective testing I'm about to talk about here in this video. So a DEXA scan or some type of body fat scan is very important to get your baseline level of, fat mass, which is the most powerful health indicator as far as body composition is concerned. Okay, lean mass to body fat ratio, as well as your waist circumference, is very important. I measure all my clients' waist circumference. And figuring out how much lean mass you have so you can figure out your optimal protein intake. If you are lifting weights and you're extremely active, I think the minimum protein intake bumps up to 0.7 grams to about 1 gram per pound of lean mass. And that lays out the foundation of your diet, is how much your protein needs. I personally strongly believe that that protein intake should be from ruminant meat. I believe that because if you do aim to get 1 gram per pound of lean mass, okay, let's just put it that way, not only are you, from the ruminant meat, not only are you going to cover your protein needs, but you're going to get 100% of the daily value of almost every single nutrient in that ruminant meat. Okay, not every single, but almost every single one. And again, the RDI, like the recommended daily intake of micronutrients, is based on very shaky science as it is. There's really no objective, clear-cut, scientifically proven amount of micronutrients that you need to get. Okay, and if you think that there is, then you're sadly mistaken and don't understand how nutrition science works. But the point is, if you are going by the government's RDIs, 1 gram per pound of lean mass of ruminant meat will provide you with 100% of your daily intake of the majority of these nutrients. So that includes most of the B vitamins except for vitamin B1, and there's another one, folate, okay? And possibly biotin. Then it does not give you the vitamin A, it does not give you the vitamin C, whether you believe that you need that or not. But that equates, for most people, a minimum of 1 pound of ruminant meat per day is adequate, and that will provide you with about 100 to 200 milligrams of magnesium and approximately 1 gram to 2 grams of potassium per pound of ruminant meat. Now, something that people don't think about is anti-nutrients and these plant compounds that hinder absorption of minerals. Because a lot of people say, well, damn, 1 pound of black beans gives me 500 milligrams of magnesium. That's 100% of my daily value. But what they don't take into consideration is how much of that is absorbed after the anti-nutrient intake is considered, the cooking, and then also your ability to digest and absorb the plant protein in general, or the plant food in general. A lot of people have trouble digesting beans and hardly digest a lot of it. It ends up in the stool undigested. So, the overall amount of net magnesium you get from these plant foods is probably not nearly as much as you get from the meat. And then when you take into consideration the daily value, the recommended daily value is based on people who are probably not eating even a half a pound of meat a day, but they're getting most of their magnesium and potassium from plant foods. And I guarantee you, 99% of the population doesn't get that much magnesium or potassium, or do they necessarily need to. But the point is, you probably don't need to stress about getting magnesium and potassium. And the amount found in 1 pound of ruminant meat is probably enough. But nonetheless, you're getting zinc, you're getting all of these nutrients, except for B1, folate and vitamin A in the ruminant meat. And so I do believe getting, 1 pound of ruminant meat a day is optimal. But even guys who are working out that I work with, trying to build muscle, even ones that work at steakhouses, they have trouble eating a pound of meat a day because they're so used to eating them the carbohydrate-based foods that they lack the capacity, the digestive capacity to do so. Anyway, so I believe that is, I'm extremely biased about that, I suppose. I would say that is the first and most important thing. Then, as far as carbohydrate intake versus fat intake, that has a lot of wiggle room. I think if you have metabolic syndrome, if your body fat percentage is over 18% as a male, if you're a male and your body fat percentage is over 18%, you should probably restrict your carbohydrates, below 50 grams a day. 100 grams is pushing it. And then once you get your body fat percentage down to anywhere from 12 to 14, maybe 15%, then you could think about bumping your carbohydrate intake up to about 100 grams a day. But, if you're not overly active, if you're not an athlete who's training multiple times a day, if all you do is weightlifting, you really don't need that much carbohydrate. You can deal with 50 grams a day. But then again, at the same time, if you're not severely overweight, you don't have diabetes, you don't have symptoms of metabolic syndrome, as long as you get your carbohydrates from whole foods, you don't really have to worry so much about the higher carbohydrate intake. But carbohydrate sources that I think are acceptable are things like tubers and roots, like squash, sweet potatoes, and then if you don't have nightshade intolerance, regular potatoes are okay. Fruits are generally okay for most people, unless you have an intolerance of some kind. So matching your carbohydrate intake to your activity and your energy expenditure is a good idea. Then you have your fatty acids. Okay, so in my opinion, I believe, so at a baseline, I can say for sure, it's probably a good idea to avoid vegetable oils. High linoleic acid, omega-6, polyunsaturated fats from vegetable oils, and also from corn-fed and soy-fed chicken. It's probably a good idea to minimize that to the greatest degree you can. And focus more on animal fats, things like suet, things like fatty wild-caught fish and things of that nature. I personally believe that there's an overwhelming abundance of literature to suggest that omega-3, in particular DHA and EPA, is healthy and is a good idea to eat a lot of. And the majority of our food, that we evolved alongside with, was much higher in EPA and DHA. And we evolved on eating the brain of animals on the land. And a lot of us lived next to the sea, and we consumed a lot of fish and, the salt that came with it and the minerals. And so what I'm getting at here is a high omega-3 intake is most likely beneficial. Most of the scientific evidence suggests that, and the amount of evidence that these repeat people talk about that suggests otherwise is very minuscule. So omega-3, cod liver oil, stuff like that, fish is good. The fat of ruminant animals that are not, too high in linoleic acid. And then obviously avoid the linoleic acid as much as you can. I think ghee is fine. I think butter is fine. Make sure that shit's grass-fed though. And then I think olive oil is okay. I think the majority of evidence, especially on populations that eat a lot of olive oil, and the monounsaturated fats, I'm not convinced are unhealthy, even if they have higher linoleic acid, But olive oil, I believe, is perfectly fine. I think that is great. I think that it's fine, but I don't think that you should be consuming most of your fat as olive oil. What else? So beyond that, making sure you get adequate minerals, especially if you're sweating on a regular basis. So if you do choose to go on a low-carb diet, I think experimenting with your salt intake is a good idea. I think, if you're feeling crampy, if you're feeling tired and lethargic, and you're not supplementing with salt, try consuming, 5 grams of sodium a day for a while, spread throughout the day. See if you feel better. Try also supplementing with, potassium salts like new salt and magnesium, okay? And just look into the info on that. I would recommend looking up the keto gains and their electrolyte recommendations, and just trying to do the general consensus of minerals for give that a 2-week trial. And if you don't feel good consuming the minerals that are recommended, then try removing all sodium and all salt and all minerals for a while and see if you feel better. Because some people, they seem to need a higher mineral intake, supplements at least on the low-carb diet. Others do not. Others do better without any added salt or magnesium at all. And if you increase your magnesium intake through supplements, then you're going to need more of the other minerals as well, I've seen. But in general, if you're not following a low-carb diet, mineral supplements are not necessary. You get plenty of magnesium, potassium, and other minerals from the ruminant meat that you're getting if you're eating a pound a day. And also from all of the other, plant foods you eat if you're eating higher carb, from bananas, oranges, and citrus fruits. And people don't know bananas are berries. Tubers, especially if you bake the tubers, if you bake the sweet potatoes, and things like that. Now the next thing is food intolerances, and this is a big thing. So, as far as specific nutritional needs, we have people who have metabolic disease. I consider cancer an extension of insulin resistance. Heart disease, I see as the extension of insulin resistance. High blood pressure, insulin resistance. Fat gain, all of this, I believe, is due to excessive intake of refined foods, linoleic acid, and refined carbs. And I believe restricting carbs is the clinical solution in the short term. Then over time, you can use an Atkins approach, where you add little bits of carbs over time to assess your carbohydrate tolerance. And as you become more metabolically flexible over time through targeted exercise and nutrition, doing restricted carb and high-intensity exercise on a regular basis, you can start to tolerate more carbs over time without negative outcomes. So if you have diabetes or any of these other diseases I mentioned that are metabolic in nature, restricting carbs. Now you have people that can be metabolically healthy and perfectly fine, but they also have food intolerances. Those people who have food intolerances are not going to be able to consume the tubers and some of these other plant foods, like these fibrous vegetables, nightshade vegetables, dairy. They're gonna, eggs they can react to. So, people who have food intolerances will manifest in what we call autoimmune disorders, like lupus, like fibromyalgia, chronic hives. A lot of times it's from eating foods that are higher in histamine, like peanuts, cacao powder, chocolate in general, aged cheeses, canned fish, things like that. Kombucha and fermented foods can trigger histamine intolerance. So a lot of people might actually be reacting to high histamine foods, but others might be reacting to some of these anti-nutrients, things like salicylates, what else? Certain lectins and things in the plants, solanine in the nightshade vegetables, and the list goes on. So for people with autoimmune illness or rashes or psoriasis, digestive illness, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, an elimination diet is very important. I found, whole grains like beans, nuts, seeds, legumes tend to cause me digestive distress. It seems like my digestive system gets used to it after a number of weeks of consuming the food. I become I almost fell off my chair there. I become a lot more tolerant to the food over time. So, and I'm very vocal about this simply because I suffered from an overabundance of like healthy food. Because I was going to Trader Joe's, I was vegan, I was eating all these whole grains, all these beans, nuts, and seeds, and I would spend $150 a week on all of these like leafy greens and these exotic plant foods that I wasn't digesting, and they were actually making me feel like shit. I didn't realize it. Compared to now, I only spend about $40 a week on meat. Like that's all I eat, mainly is meat. And then I've been experimenting with targeted ketosis lately by taking a tablespoon or two of honey before my hardest workouts, because I train 3 times a day. I do powerlifting in the morning, I do jiu-jitsu directly after that, and I do 2 more sessions of jiu-jitsu later on, sometimes Muay Thai. So I mean, I'm not like everyone else. I train hard, but anyway, point is, wasting all this money on plant foods only to realize that they were the underlying cause of my psoriasis and digestive problems. Although it depends, because only certain plant foods can trigger that for me. Anyway, this is actually fairly common. Lots of people deal with these issues, so I make sure that people know about that. So next, after that, we have herbs. Okay, so I think some of these spices, like, so also fiber, I don't think you need to aim to eat a certain amount of fiber. I think just eating plant foods that you crave and that you enjoy is fine, and I think that's a better strategy than like trying to eat all this broccoli for the what is it, the glutaraphanin, the sulforaphane. Trying to eat all this broccoli for the sulforaphane to prevent cancer. I'm eating 3 pounds of fucking broccoli a day to prevent cancer. Spending $10 a day on fucking broccoli sprouts. I don't think that's a smart thing. I think that's a waste of energy and time, and it's not actually going to produce the benefit Rhonda Patrick thinks it will. I don't think you need to drink wine for the, what is it called? Damn it, my mind's blanking out because I don't really care about these plant compounds as much anymore. But you don't need to be aiming to get all these plant compounds. You don't need all that fiber, you don't need the sulforaphane, you don't need any of that crap. But if you crave broccoli and you want to eat broccoli and you have enough money to buy broccoli, go for it, So you have herbs. So I'm a big believer in plant compounds for healing. I take, lately I've been taking KSM 66 ashwagandha, and I find that high quality, reputable brand. I'm taking the Jarrow's brand. I've tried Nature's Bounty, and I don't really feel like it provides the same benefit that the Jarrow brand does. Jarrow's KSM 66, I've been taking about 600 milligrams in the morning. Anyway, I believe depending on what your needs are. So if you have anxiety, things like rhodiola, ashwagandha, but different types of forms of these with different types of extracts, different brands can affect you differently. So don't just think one herb has all the same effects. So it all depends. But ashwagandha, reishi mushroom, cordyceps, rhodiola, even high quality gong fu style brewed green tea and white tea and oolong tea can have a relaxing effect. And the list goes on. A lot of these plant compounds are very beneficial. I think adaptogens are great. I think people who say that they don't really do much for them, either they're taking a low quality extract or they just are not very mindful of how they feel in response to compounds in general. Or maybe it's because they're expecting a pharmaceutical grade effect where they feel high. And a lot of these don't provide that. They just provide subtle support in the background that makes significant results over time. So yeah, plant compounds like, plant adaptogens, and also if you have like low stomach acid, remedies like apple cider vinegar are powerful. So I'm a big fan of these plant compounds for support and for healing, but I'm not a big believer in like making plants a huge part of your diet to support health. I don't think eating a pound of broccoli a day or eating a pound of apples a day, I don't think that's beneficial. I think maybe to get things like vitamin C, magnesium, maybe carbohydrate for some people. I think that these things can make you feel better because of things like that. And obviously, there are compounds like I'm drinking like coffee with cacao powder right now. Coffee has very powerful psychoactive benefits, and it can help you if you have bowel issues. It can help you with bowel movements. Cacao powder is very powerful for stimulating the brain and the mood and things like that, and libido as well. So, I mean, these are very powerful, and I think these are great things, and I'm an advocate of that. But again, I'm not eating a pound of cacao. In fact, I don't eat beans at all, other than when I'm drinking. Drink bean juice, right? I don't think people should be stocking up on legumes unless they're poor and they're starving and they need like backup food. So, that's my philosophy. I'm a huge supporter of plant medicine, but not plants as a main part of your diet. So then the next level of herbs would be things like thyme, what else? Like herbs de Provence, rosemary and stuff like that. So rosemary added to your food, especially if it's boiled, has mental stimulating effects and, mood stimulating effects. And also if you drink it as tea, it can do the same thing. And it can also help clear out urinary tract infections. You have other things like, not rosemary, what's the other one? Oregano. Oregano is very powerful for antibacterial properties, antifungal, anti-candida. And so eating that in your food on a regular basis, I mean, maybe it'll cause, an imbalance in gut bacteria because of this. A lot of these herbs are antibacterial, but at the same time, maybe it promotes healthy bacteria and kills off bad bacteria. Maybe consuming these antibacterial herbs like oregano and stuff like that, and garlic on a regular basis are very powerful, maybe for helping to, prevent infections, right? So eating it as a regular part of your diet might contribute towards killing off the good bacteria in your intestine, but at the same time, I would think they're overall health promoting. They're high in antioxidants, which I think, and also they're high in substances that create oxidative damage, that create a hormetic response. I do believe that a lot of these plant compounds are probably creating a beneficial effect on our antioxidant defense systems. I'm not fully on board with Rhonda Patrick's version of plant hormesis, xenohormesis. I'm not fully on board with Paul Soladino and his idea that these plant compounds, they are reacting on the NRF2 pathways and antioxidant defense system the same way that cigarettes are. That's something that he says, that they seem to be triggering the same pathways that cigarettes do. And I honestly, from all the studies we have on people who eat more plant foods, they don't experience the same outcomes as people who smoke more cigarettes. And so population and correlation studies, they can't prove that these plant foods are healthy, but I think if we compare them to the same type of studies done on people who are smoking cigarettes, it proves at least that these plant compounds that stimulate NRF2 probably do not work on our bodies the same way that cigarettes do, the way Paul Soladino is claiming. And this is not based on facts. This is based on logic and the evidence. Because, evidence is not necessarily proving anything. It's providing ideas and speculation. So, if you enjoy eating, adding herbs and spices to your food, do it. And if it makes you feel good that you believe that there's like a hormetic response, honestly, I've been eating these herbs forever, and I've noticed that they don't seem to have any harmful effects on me at all. I have noticed since I removed carbs from my diet and I eat mainly meat, um, so for a long time, even with white jasmine rice in my diet, and I was eating a lot of these garlic and spices and things like that, cayenne pepper and all of these herbs that I mentioned, these spices, these herbs of Provence and whatnot, and turmeric and things like that. For years, since like 2015, I've been eating a lot of these things, believing that they had antioxidant properties. And I've only gotten sick maybe at the time when I was eating carbs and all these spices, on average, maybe 3 times a year at the most. And the times I would get sick, it would be mild and only last like three days, right? I've noticed though that, so removing milk, like mainly just like milk that contains lactose, that has significantly reduced my mucus production and my sore throats and my susceptibility to these things. I find cheese doesn't really seem to affect it as much as just like, liquid milk. But I found a low carb diet when I removed carbs and eat mainly meat in December of 2018. I've only gotten sick mildly once, and I don't even know if that was a sickness. I got hit in the throat and then I had a sore throat for like 2 weeks. I think it was because a guy hit me in the throat, honestly. So I might have gotten sick maybe like once in the 2 years I've been, ketogenic. And that's including eating a lot of cheese and stuff like that. So, yeah, so what I'm getting at is, when I was eating high carbs, I wasn't getting sick as much as these other people, but I was consuming a lot of these herbs and spices and things that people believe are hormetic. And so if they were as harmful as cigarettes, like fucking Paul Saladino is inferring, I don't think I would be. I'm pretty sure I'd be sick a lot more often, and I would be feeling like crap. So, and then all the people that eat all these high amounts of antioxidants from these, and these plant compounds and polyphenols, they'd be falling dead and, having problems too. We don't see like significant negative effects from these polyphenols and plant compounds. We just don't. But you might react negatively to it as an intolerant to specific to you. So, what about organ meats? Something I should have touched on at the beginning of this video. I think if you're trying to get adequate nutrition based on the RDI, I think a pound of ruminant meat and then probably like 4 ounces of liver every couple days. I like calf liver because it tastes better than beef liver. But yeah, just getting some kind of liver and some organ meats in your body. And I think liver's the best because on paper it does plug in all the holes that regular muscle meat does not plug. And then vitamin C you can get from lemon juice, you can get from a supplement, and you can get a tiny bit from liver, but you might not even need vitamin C. So that's something I've kind of been back and forth with, and I've made videos, a lot of videos about all of that. So you can check those out, search up my channel name and vitamin C, and you'll find those videos. So things like honey, I think honey should be, that's a nuanced subject, but if you're getting the high quality honey that contains the hard fragments from the hive and whatnot, I think that it's, most of the studies suggest it does not act like a high glycemic load refined carb. But keep that to a minimum unless you're an athlete consuming, about 50 grams maximum before your hardest workouts might not be a bad idea. Things like coffee, I think, again, if you have severe panic disorder and anxiety, cutting out caffeine is probably a good idea. I think switching to green tea isn't a bad idea. If you brew green tea in the Kung Fu style, Gong Fu green tea brewing, then you can keep caffeine in your diet without experiencing negative symptoms. Kung Fu style green tea or tea brewing, I'm going to make a video about that separately. I think is very good for people with anxiety because, number one, the way that you brew Kung Fu style, it's tiny cups of tea brewed only 30 seconds at a time, and it has a very like ceremonial, meditative type practice, and you can actually, it's like meditation. The very act of brewing that way is like meditation. It's tiny bits of tea over the hour with the same tea leaf, versus if you just like, do a tea bags and you brew it for like 3 to 5 minutes, that's not very meditative at all. You're getting such a high concentration of all the caffeine and the polyphenols and the tannins at once. It shocks your system like coffee. But if you brew Kung Fu style, 30 seconds at a time, you're getting tiny amounts of the caffeine and the theanine and the tea compounds, tiny amounts, little by little, over time. So already, green tea and tea in general doesn't really provide as much caffeine, in general. But then since you're doing the tiny bits over time, it's even less of an anxiety effect. And then of course you have the mindfulness of brewing the tea. And the fact that tea contains theanine and other polyphenols, the theanine blunts the caffeine's effects and makes you more relaxed and has an anti-anxiety effect. And the polyphenols seem to actually cause the caffeine to release slower into the bloodstream, which is probably why green tea seems to provide different effects. So Kung Fu style green tea, probably the best form of caffeine. And I think that is one reason why these Asian countries probably have higher amounts of longevity, not to mention their wide variety of animal foods that they consume. So I think that about wraps up the majority of it. Maybe I'll touch on salt. I think salt is a very individual thing. And pretty much all of these things I mentioned, besides your minimum protein intake, are individual. But I think everyone needs to eat, that minimum amount of protein and get it from ruminant sources. And from there, it depends on your metabolic health, it depends on your autoimmune condition, your individual responses to different foods, your needs, whether you're an athlete or not. Do you have like dental disease? If you have dental disease, but you're metabolically healthy, you should probably still limit carbohydrates to get that dental condition under control. Individual supplements and adaptogens, not everybody's going to benefit from ashwagandha or whatever. Not everybody's going to get arthritis from nightshade vegetables. Not everybody's going to experience chronic sinus issues from dairy. Not everybody's going to have digestive issues from certain foods either. So leave your question, comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what works for you, and I'll talk to y'all next time.